The recent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump has shocked the nation, the world. Whether you're a supporter or not of Mr. Trump, just that blatant scene witnessed by millions and millions on television of a 20-year-old who they still can't figure out the motive, just a few hundred feet from the president, shooting at his head, has now become iconic, that image. Many are wondering, is this divine intervention? Just the cock of the head, the turn, for a split second, a centimeter, and it could have been a very different result. So it was the tragic death of one of the attendees, 2 injured. So the entire country has now been, captured by these scenes. Is this just another blip on the screen? Another one of those tragic, violent acts that we see from time to time, gun violence? Or is this a watershed moment? Can this change things? Not just for Mr. Trump, not just for the presidential election, but overall, with all the polarization, with the vitriol, perhaps unprecedented, can this really change things? Please join me in this very important discussion in this historic time. How can Trump's shooting change the world? Hi, this is Simon Jacobson, and we'll be speaking about how can Trump's shooting change the world. This program is dedicated by Kirk Lemoyne in honor of the dedicated team at Meaningful Life Center who commit their lives to helping others. So the iconic image that has already now been etched in millions, maybe billions of minds of President Trump, former President Trump, current candidate Trump, running for president against the current president, Joe Biden. Standing there in the Pennsylvania field, Baylor, Pennsylvania, speaking, and just less than 10 minutes into his talk, the image and the sounds of gunshots, and Mr. Trump turning his head and then dropping down on the ground and then rising with the security, with the Secret Service all around him, and his ear bleeding with blood on his face, being protected and then literally almost carried out to safety. We've all seen it. We by now know also who the shooter was. He was killed by one of the snipers of the Secret Service. 20-year-old, young man, looks like a child. Still no clue what was behind this. But this has riveted our nation, and the world for that matter. Since the attempt on Ronald Reagan's life in 1981, this is the first attempt on a presidential candidate, a former president. So it's not the first time we hear about attacks on presidents, but it's not that common. 4 U.S. presidents were killed by by assassination. Garfield, McKinley, of course JFK, and who's the fourth? We all know, Abraham Lincoln. So not in that order. And there were assassination attempts against Teddy Roosevelt and now against Mr. Trump. So these things don't go away because it's an attack in the most blatant way against a presidential candidate, against a person who can become the next chief executive, commander-in-chief of the greatest country in the world. But is this a blip in the screen? Is this something that, okay, comes and goes? It will clearly have an effect on the ongoing campaign. Now we're middle of the Republican convention and the election. You know, some say this is guarantees President Trump to win the election. We'll see. But in a bigger picture, what does it teach us, if anything? That there's gun violence in this country? Yes, it's brought to the fore yet again. That perhaps as Mr. Biden said, President Biden said, that the temperature has risen in the vitriol, in the language, in the inciting language, that has to be lowered. I think we all can agree. But is there a bigger lesson here? When something that happens that is so vivid and captures the minds of so many people, as I said, riveting us. So to quote Maimonides, where he writes that when a catastrophe befalls someone or a community, it would be cruel and insensitive to consider it just as a random accident. But we have to see it as a wake-up call, a time for introspection, soul-searching. Now, we all reject and definitely don't try to justify tragedy. But when it happens, we don't ignore it. We must learn from it. So what are the lessons that we can learn from this? And specifically, as we title this class, that have the power to transform and change the world. Look, every crime, every act of violence, every murder is a wake-up call. A wake-up call to where we stand. What are our values? How can that happen? What can we do about it? But especially when it's so, as I said, so public. Probably in the most prominent possible way. So then the wake-up call is so much more so because it's affected so many of us and we have everyone's attention. So let's get back to the very essence of what we're talking about here. How is it possible that one person should want to hurt another person? I know it sounds like a naive, simplistic question, but it's an important question. Little children don't have such desires. We're not born that way. It's true, selfishness can lead to being insensitive, to be cruel, to hurt another. But when you talk about literally going ahead and planning to murder someone, to assassinate someone, so of course we have to understand what's lying behind it. You could dismiss it as a mental health issue. Someone is imbalanced, someone's angry, someone was incited, because you don't see people doing this all the time. Even people who are angry. So maybe there's something going on that this person was unbalanced. And these analyses go on with whether serial murderers or single murderers or people like Lee Harvey Oswald, who killed, assassinated JFK, still shrouded in some mystery. But is there anything more to it? And even if that's the case, so then we could just dismiss it. Hey, listen, this is an anomaly. A person was imbalanced. Maybe something triggered him. And he went to vent this way. It's definitely not acceptable, but it's not something, what do I have to learn from that? But I want to submit there's more to it than that. I don't know the story with this particular individual. We'll find out, I'm sure, some more. But overall, when we look at issues, we can't just look at the symptoms. We have to look also at the roots, at the causes. What ultimately holds someone back from hurting another person? If I got angry at you, why shouldn't I just do anything I want? Is it fear of being caught? Is that the deterrent? Punishment? Embarrassment? Or is there something more? So it's really a question of morality. What are the foundations of morality? So when this country was founded, we don't have to look very far. That's what it was looking to do, because it felt it was being unjustly treated by King George of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, of England, and felt the need to break away and declare its independence from that oppression. The first time in history, mind you. When the Jews left Egypt, that's the first documented emancipation and freedom from slavery. But they still were a wandering people. It took time till they built a nation, until they came to a country. The United States declared independence and declared themselves an independent state, a country, called the United States of America. And it became the first institutionalized free land, free country. So of course they were grappling with the most important issue, morality. What will stop someone else becoming a dictator in this very country and imposing his will on others, as so many monarchs have done, and so many previous despots and fascists and totalitarians, or whatever you want to call them. So that was critical for the founding fathers to find an answer to this. And indeed they did. They studied the Bible. And we could see it from their writings and their letters and their thinking. And indeed, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, they established, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and are endowed by the Creator with unalienable rights, which means they're endowed by the Creator, not by any human being. We all answer to the same Creator, and we're all equal in the eyes of the Creator. Take away that element, and morality becomes arbitrary. This is not a declaration of religion, because we do have the separation of religion, of church and state. But it's understanding that morality has to be built on a bedrock that's unwavering. If it's subjective, it's based on that I'm giving you these rights, me as a human being, or even the country of the United States is giving it to you, we could also revoke it. That's why they use the word creator. I've long struggled with this question. I've asked many constitutional experts and attorneys why they use the word creator, which creates, no pun intended, the issue of seemingly like religion. They could have said all men are born equal, all men are equal, all people are equal. Why do they have to use the word creator? My answer, I've never gotten a satisfactory answer, because they realize if you don't use the word creator, then it becomes all men are equal. Who says? Maybe some are more equal than others. So a majority can decide that a minority are not equal. And we've seen that, unfortunately, many times in history. Once you say it's a creator, it's absolute, because none of us are the creator. So everybody's equal. Man, woman, child, doesn't matter, black, white. Even though at the time they had slaves, but they didn't even realize that they put into their own writing something that would undo their own slavery ownership. Because all men are created equal. Their justification, some people are not men, but that ended up obviously did not hold water. Just as an aside, you look into an insurance policy, you'll see, like say a homeowner's insurance policy, you'll see it covers the basic damages to a home, fire and so on. But what about, let's say, a hurricane or a volcano or an earthquake? So you'll see in almost all insurance policy, unless there's a special addendum, it says it doesn't protect under the storms like hurricanes and so on, and other acts of God. It doesn't say acts of nature. So that I asked once an attorney, why doesn't it say acts of nature? And why don't the atheists of this country complain? What do you mean acts of God? What happens if you don't believe in God? So he said, because God is guaranteed that it's not my responsibility. If you said acts of nature, you could have an argument. The insurance company can say, it's your problem. We're not the ones that have to defend nature. The person who's making the claim can claim that, no, the insurance company should deal with the nature part. Once it's God, we have a perfect scapegoat. So God has certain benefits, I guess. But getting back to our topic on a serious note, that guarantees it. Now this principle, where does it come from? It comes from the Ten Commandments, which the founding fathers were avid students of. What's the first of the Ten Commandments? I am your God that took you out of Egypt. And then afterwards we have, do not steal, do not murder. Remove that first statement, then murder can be arbitrary. Maybe there are situations where you can murder. Look, the Germans proved, and they were of course in their godlessness, that you can decide murdering or hurting a pet for them was a great crime, but murdering innocent children, men, women, and children called Jews, or others that they found undesirable, was perfectly fine. But when there's a God, there's a higher authority, that nobody can argue with. So that's the foundation of it all. I am your God. An accountability to a higher authority. This is not a declaration of religion per se, because it's not telling you if you have to embrace it through a religion or which religion, but it's an embrace of a concept that the founding fathers understood is the only way to guarantee absolute morality. So, for now, disregarding any mental issues and so on, which distort and can cause a person, schizophrenia can cause all kinds of delusions. The ultimate way to teach our children, to teach ourselves, why you don't hurt another person, let alone kill someone, let alone try to assassinate a president, potential president, former president, is not because it's not the right thing to do, because you're answer to a higher authority. Everything else is a Band-Aid. Law enforcement can deal with the crime after the fact. Perhaps could prevent by doing the right checkups and the right security. We hear there's big questions of the lapses that happened. But those all do not stop someone from wanting to assassinate someone else, because those all deal with the symptoms. The root issue has to be dealt with by the person not wanting and not being able to, because there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears. And you answer to that. If our children in this country, if every child, every man, woman, and child in this country, in the world, would have that infused, saturated into your very wiring, that is the ultimate preventive medicine. Is it an absolute guarantee in life? There are no guarantees. There's always risks. But we know we want to minimize the risks. That is what this exposes. It exposes a moral decay that has infiltrated and deteriorated the foundations of these principles, and therefore our values. When you hear about students going on a rampage and killing fellow students, I remember in Columbine, in other schools, in Sandy Hook and so on, well, it wasn't their students, but regardless, attacking children. And you come to realize that the attackers were not mentally unstable. It was either a thrill killings. You come to realize that there's a foundational element missing. There should be inside each of our hearts We're not here to do whatever we like. We answer to someone. There's a creator. That is what's lacking in our schools. So it's no surprise what's happening in universities. You don't like someone else? You have a different opinion? There are ways to disagree. But through violence, through anger, through hurting people, through things that are offensive and violating other people's space and life and rights, that comes from a moral decay of the foundations. That's not just a cosmetic issue. So when we see an assassination attempt in such a glaring way, such a riveting way, so obviously we have to do everything possible to strengthen our law enforcement and to prevent other such attacks. We need to pray for Mr. Trump and for Mr. Biden and for all people out there. We need to share our condolences with those that were tragically killed, with the one that was tragically killed and those that were hurt. That all is obvious. But something so powerful, such a visual, such a scene that is so powerful, such an event, has to elicit from us an equally passionate call, once and for all, to revisit the foundations upon which this country was built. So yes, the shooting of Mr. Trump can change the world. With leaders of all types, secular leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, business leaders, in every industry, parents, educators, everyone has to join together in something that's completely nonpartisan and non-political and non-parochial for that matter. That we are all here, we share an earth, and we answer to a higher calling. How you define that higher calling, that everybody can figure out on their own. We're not imposing anything. But the very fact that we need to answer to higher calling, that should not be negotiable. Because that is the guarantee that a person cannot touch another person's life because it's sacred. That person was created by the Creator, a divine image. How do you have a right to defile, to violate that divine image? That to be in our feeling. On the positive side, you should be considering loving the sanctity of every human being because these are God's people. You think that man perched on the roof, if he was thinking about what is above him, meaning a God that watches, and looking at Mr. Trump and saying this is a man that God put on this world, in this earth, would he be capable of doing something like that? Guaranteed he wasn't thinking of it. And guaranteed that most of us are not thinking in that way. That's how we have to start looking at people. As God's children. Human beings created in the divine image. Now that divine image, you may not agree with their opinions, you may not agree with their approach, they may not agree with their way they choose to live their lives. But they're still created in the divine image just as you are. That is the foundation. When you have that, everything else follows. So what we have before us is a historic, iconic, a once-in-a-lifetime wake-up call. A wake-up call for a revolution in our education systems, a revolution in our homes, a revolution in every aspect of society, in every industry. We must teach each other and teach ourselves and our children from the youngest age that we're all here on a mission. Defining that mission, every person is going to have to figure out through their education, through their parenting, through their faith or whatever they follow. But that we're all here on a collective and common mission, a higher calling, and that we all answer to. And no one has a right to compromise or violate someone else's journey. You want to work with them, inspire them, educate, collaborate, even argue in a civil way, by all means. If that was beating in our chests, this belief, answering to the higher authority, this is running through our veins and arteries, guarantee that would prevent so much of what we all find abhorrent. Now it's up to us. I would have liked to believe that Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden and everyone else, but especially leaders, would have come out with that type of declaration. Not just, we cannot tolerate political violence. That's better than nothing, but much more than that. We need a revolution, and we need people who have courage to say it. Because there are those that are going to say, don't tell people, we can't teach our children about higher authority. That's like imposing religion upon them. No, it's imposing the basic foundations that every logical person, starting with the founding fathers who believed in the separation of church and state, knows that without that, you don't have an unwavering and unshakable foundation for values. Think of a company. You follow a company's culture that has rules. As simple as that. If you break the rules, you're out. The company called the United States, which is essentially an institution, has the same idea. There are rules. Do not murder, because I am your God. So, my friends, we have a tremendous opportunity here. I don't know if it's going to come from the top down or from the bottom up, but let's start from the bottom up to create a grassroots revolution that each of us should demand this of each other. I mean demand in behoove us, in a beautiful way, in an inspiring way, in an uplifting way. So for all the negative reactions and all the horror that we witnessed and the shock, we now have to counter that with even more passion on the positive side for a call to action that will transform our homes and our schools and our environments and our political systems and all our social structures with that foundational principle that we all answer to and are accountable to a higher authority, an eye that sees and an ear that hears. That will in some way redeem. It will not bring back the life of the person who tragically was killed. It will not remove the pain, but it will redeem and say, this served as a watershed moment in history that indeed changed things. I see no reason that we can't launch and maintain such a revolution. Call it a spiritual revolution, a moral revolution. And it's in our hands. With technology, with communicating, with sharing this message, we can change the world. And then we can look back and say, yes, an event happened that shook everyone, an assassination attempt that could have ended up much worse than it did. We turned it into a transformational moment for each of us and all of us, to the point where we can say that we are doing our part to usher in a world, as Isaiah the prophet says, no more evil and no more destruction, because it will be a world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Thank you so much. This has been Simon Jacobson, meaningfullife.com. Please share this. I would encourage you to share it. Love to hear your feedback and thoughts and comments. Please subscribe to our offerings, our YouTube channel. And every other way, let us continue to perpetuate this message to our own, in our own homes, to our own communities, to our sphere of influence. Thank you again, and be blessed and be well. May God protect our leaders, protect President Biden, protect former President Trump, and all good people in this world. Be well and be blessed.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.